3, 2, 1.
Hi everyone, this is Victoria Wolders, and this is another empathy tale from mykidslocker.com. So happy that you joined us today. If you would like to connect with me, I would love for you to reach out to me through all the social media outlets, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Tumblr. You can also listen to this podcast on many different platforms from Spotify, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, and of course Spreaker. So I hope that you are having a lovely start to your day. I hope that the sun is shining wherever you are. And if it's not, I hope you find your sunshine somewhere today, in someone, through someone, or maybe around someone. Well, today's story is called The Forgiven Prisoners. And this is a story about forgiveness. And if you are comfortable, then I will begin. Once upon a time, a long time ago, in the land of the Oak and Eagle Kingdom, in the land of the Southern Eagle, there lived a prince. The prince lived in a castle with his father. The king and the prince lived in a land of gems and jewels. He was called Prince Topaz, and the king was named King Sapphire. King Sapphire had a throne room that was covered in sapphires, and when his son was born, the Prince Topaz had emeralds and topaz embedded in the walls of his throne. See, both the king and the prince both valued the gems and jewels that came from the land. King Sapphire and Prince Topaz lived together in a very large castle on the side of a hill. The breeze would blow through the green grass and the sun would shine so brightly. And often the sun would hit the sides of the castle as well as into the throne room, and the beautiful topaz and emeralds would glisten in the beautiful daylight. Unfortunately, the queen passed away when the prince was at a young age. Her name was Queen Diamond. The father was left to take care of the prince. Unfortunately, King Sapphire was a very jealous man, and he chose to use words that were harmful and hurtful. He made poor decisions. He would often choose unwisely and choose not to empathize with people. What happened was, his son, Prince Topaz, was the opposite. He chose ways of softness and kindness and helpfulness. He chose to love. He chose to walk in the ways of caring and kindness. He would often stare out from his window, and he would see across the Oak and Eagle Kingdom all the way to the land of the Northern Eagle, the Eastern Eagle, and the Western Eagle. He would often see all of these castles. One day he went to his father, and his father had a number of altercations in the morning. Yet the number of people that were angry at his father, Prince Topaz never knew. But that anger funneled into his father, and the father was full of rage. Prince Topaz decided to approach his father the day that he was full of rage. He said, "Father, I have decided to leave our palace, and I have decided to explore our land and to go meet new people." Well, King Sapphire got very angry at Prince Topaz and cast him down into the dungeon and said, "I'm going to keep you in my dungeon for the week." He said, "You are not allowed to leave my castle. My bride has passed away. Queen Diamond was my gem. You are my treasure as well, and I cannot let both leave my hands. I will leave you in the dungeon for you to think about your decision about leaving, and my hope is you will change your mind." I think that you will decide to leave. You will leave eventually, and I understand that. But at this time, you are young, and I think that you should stay. Please consider wisely whether it's good for you to leave. So for the next week, I want you to spend time in the dungeon. Prince Topaz laughed. He said, "You're not serious, Father. You're not throwing me down into the dungeon?" King Sapphire started to get angry. His face turned red, and the tension in his shoulders heightened. King Sapphire said, "You want to leave me because you don't like me and you hate me." Prince Topaz fell on his knees and said, "Father, I have never said that. I have never said that I was leaving you because I don't like you. I'm planning not to leave you because I don't like you. It's because I truly want to explore the land and go see other things." King Sapphire began to raise his voice. "Son, go down to the dungeon. I command you." And Prince Topaz became upset, said, "Father, I don't want to go down to the dungeon." But King Sapphire turned to his guards and said, "I demand Prince Topaz to be thrown in the dungeon for a whole week." So Prince Topaz was grabbed by the arm and forcefully put down into the dungeon for 1 full week. When Prince Topaz arrived in the dungeon, it was dark, it was damp. It felt like someone's cold hand was running down his back. And it felt like 1,000 spiders with hundreds of spider webs in his mind as well as around him. It was a cold, damp place. And as he went into the dungeon, he crawled into a corner of the room. Soon he realized in the room there were 4 corners, and he had crawled into one corner, but there were 3 other corners, and there were 3 other men in the dungeon. The first man came out into the light. He was an elderly man. He looked impoverished. He didn't wear very nice clothing. He didn't have any shoes, and he looked like he hadn't eaten in a long time. Suddenly, the second person came out of the shadows. He was a boy. He looked like he was 16, or around then. And he was very young, and he looked at the dungeon, almost dazed and confused. But there was an extreme sadness in his face that the prince could not put his finger on. He had been crying for days, and you could see the weariness in his face. The third man was a middle-aged man, yet his hair had grown white and straggly. You could see stress had been on his face. His eyebrows were thick, his hair was knotted, and all 3 men sat in the same dungeon with Prince Topaz. Emerald sat there. Sorry, not Emerald. Prince Topaz sat there, and he began to think of his home above the dungeon and how beautiful it was. But then he realized he was in the dungeon for a whole week. He began to look at all the men, and all of them were silent. Suddenly, Prince Topaz looked at all 3 of them and said, "Help me understand why you 3 men are here." The elderly man spoke first. "I am very poor. I have stomach pains, and I don't know where they come from. The only thing that suits my stomach pains is bread. And a couple days ago, I was in the village and realized I had no money, but my stomach pains were paining me. I also have a wife at home who does not walk, and she is bedridden because of sores on her legs and on her back. I do not know why she is ill, but she lies in her bed crying. I also know that she needs bread to eat, to stay alive. I didn't have enough money, and I stole some bread so that I would be able to feed myself as well as my wife, who is ill. I was caught, and because I was caught, I am now in this dungeon, and will stay in this dungeon forever. The man began to weep. He said, "I haven't seen my wife. I was taken from the streets, and I do not know where she is. I hope that my neighbors care for her, but I never was able to say goodbye to her." He slowly backed into the deep, dark shadows, as if he was crawling into a cave that he had come, that was full of the shadows of his past and the agony of his future. Prince Topaz's heart broke, and he turned to the young boy. He was around 16, and he said, "Son, you're so young. Why are you here?" He said, "A long time ago, I was in the forest. There was a person who was hit over the head and hurt. I was on a different part of the forest, but the guards saw me walking through the forest and thought I was the one who did it. It was never me, though. I did not commit the crime. Someone else did, but I'm serving the crime for that person." He, too, began to cry and went into the darkness of the corner of the dungeon. Prince Topaz was baffled by it. How could someone serve for a crime they never committed? And yet this man is serving in the dungeon forever because someone now has gone free. He truly was a sacrifice. The third man stepped out from the shadows, and the prince said, "Can you tell me your story?" The man said, "Yes. I have a wife, and I have children. One of my daughters is blind, and one of my daughters is deaf. My wife and I have tried our best to take good care of our children, but unfortunately, we cannot. I have been struggling with understanding what to do. My father is a very rich man. Years ago, I got very angry at him, and I left. I said I would never talk to him again because he used to hurt me and my sister. So, what I did is in my poverty, I went to his castle in the land of the Eastern Eagle, and I broke a window. I went into his living room, and I sat in the living room looking at all the gold, and my mother had passed away, and I noticed her ring on the table. My father knew that I always wanted his ring, so I decided to hold it. But at that very moment, my very angry and bitter father came in, and he was very upset at me breaking into his house. He hadn't seen me in years, and his heart had hardened, as if it had been clay left out for days and days on end in the very hot sun of anger and rage. I told him how my daughter, one of my daughters, was deaf, and how one of my daughters was blind. They didn't know him. They didn't know my mother who had passed away when I was young. We didn't know how to care for them, and that if I could just have this ring, then everything would be good. When my father, being an angry man, said, "No, you broke into my house. You are no longer my son. I disown you." At that very point, I began to cry. He then said, "Call the guards," and the guards came. They came and arrested me, and what happened was that I was taken to this dungeon. I was told I was never going to come out. Once again, the third man backed into a corner into the shadows, and at that very moment, all four men were in a corner of the room with their head bowed low into the shadows. All four men were crying, and they were sad. If anyone had heard their story and understood their situation, then maybe there might have been grace. There might have been forgiveness. From the outsider's point of view, all of them had committed a crime that was unforgivable. Prince Topaz said to the men, "I will talk to my king, and I will let you out. I am here for a week, and we will come to know each other better." Over the next week, all four of them came to know each other very well. Prince Topaz came to know the names of their family members, and within a week, Prince Topaz knew them in a deep way that probably many people never knew. In time, Prince Topaz was released, and he chose to go and talk to King Sapphire. Before he went to walk into the throne room, he did turn back and say to the men in the dungeon, "I want you to know I will always remember you. I see you and I value you." As Prince Topaz proceeded to go up the stairs to the throne room, he managed his way through the big doors and into the open area of the glorious, splendid sapphires and topaz and emeralds and diamonds that were embedded into the throne room and the thrones. He fell on his knees and he said, "I beg you, these three men are innocent, yet on the outside it looks like they've done something very wrong. Would you forgive them? Would you forgive them if you heard their story? Would you have mercy and grace on them? Because they need that at this very moment." King Sapphire got angry. He said, "Son, this is not your place. This is not your job. Those three men have served or will be there for the rest of their life because they have committed 3 crimes. I don't have time to hear their story. I don't have time to hold their tears in my hand as they weep and wallow. Who knows, they might too get angry at me. I do not have time for them." King Sapphire said, "The only way to get those 3 men out is for you to promise me that you will never leave this castle, and you will be the one that will be kept in this castle. I like you around, and I like you here. Believing that you're going to be traveling the Oak and Eagle Kingdom, you may never come back, and I do not want that to happen. I believe that maybe one day you will forget me. So, I will set the 3 men free, but that would mean you would forgo ever going out of this castle again. Then and only then would under those conditions will I let the 3 men free." Prince Topaz knew that he was a young man, and he always wanted to venture out and see the rest of the Oak and Eagle Kingdom. But he also knew these 3 men, the elderly man with the sick wife. He also knew the young boy who had been lied to and had made a mistake. And then the 3rd man, who was the one with the wealthy father who would not forgive him. See, all of these people were in situations that were very painful. Although all 3 men knew that they had to serve their time for different things and being in different places, maybe being at the wrong place at the wrong time, like the 16-year-old, he too knew that there was pain upon pain upon pain that could be continuing to happen because their family members were missing them. Prince Topaz looked at the King Sapphire and said, "I will do it. I will stay in this castle forever. I will forgo ever going out and seeing the rest of the kingdom, and I will serve you because that's what you would do, that you would like me to do. You want me here because you want to take care of me. You want me here because you are lonely. You want me here to mellow the anger and rage that simmers in you." So, they called the 3 prisoners up to the throne room. Prince Topaz was sitting on the throne room floor, as King Sapphire felt that it wasn't necessary for Prince Topaz to sit in his throne yet, as he hadn't earned that privilege. The 3 men came up, all 3 men with tears in their eyes. All said, "King, we don't know why you brought us up here. The sunlight is blaring, and we see the beautiful gems and jewels that are embedded in all these things. But we don't know why you have brought us up here. We are to serve a lifetime in the dungeon." Prince Topaz said, "I do. I have talked to my father, and you are free to go. I will stay in this castle for you. You know, the only thing I ask you to do is for each of you to go travel the world for me, because I will never be able to have that privilege of being able to travel the world. Go to parts of the Oak and Eagle Kingdom. Will you each be able to go to one other corner of this kingdom and be able to get me an eagle feather? And once you bring it back, then please, I will take each of those eagle feathers from each of the other lands, and I will put them on my throne room to remember you and to always think about you, because those are so much more precious than all the sapphires and emeralds and diamonds that are embedded in the walls of this castle. Come back and tell me about the beauty in the other parts of the kingdom. Draw me pictures. Maybe tell me about that beautiful sunset you saw, or maybe the majestic mountains, or the majestic river, or maybe tell me about the fairy forest. Prince Topaz turned to the elderly man and said, I know that your wife is ill, and I know that she would want to see nature again. When you go into nature in other parts of the Oak and Eagle Kingdom, would you please write music that you hear in other parts of the land? The elderly man started to cry. He said to the young boy, who was convicted of a crime he did not commit, would you do me a favor? Would you travel the lands, and would you pick for me all the exotic plants and flowers and bring them back? Plant them in my garden so I will be able to see them grow. And that was Prince Topaz talking to the young boy. Then he turned to the last man. The man who had a daughter who was deaf and a daughter who was blind and who had no riches. He said, would you ask your daughter who is blind to listen to all the beautiful birds, and would she please create music from them, with her stringed instruments to mimic them? The daughter who was deaf, would she look and draw pictures that are beautiful, such as a beautiful flower or your home? All these little gifts please send to me over the years, so it will remind me of the beauty that you see that I may not be able to see. I will give you an abundance of money to be able to supply to you, and you will no longer be poor. I will, over time, pull the sapphires from my throne room, and I will sell them, and you will take the money, and be able to create a new home for your family and for you. See, I would have had money to travel, but now it is yours. All three men had tears in their eyes, and they looked at each other. They believed that this prince, the Emerald Prince, had truly made a sacrifice to make them live again. From that point on, they lived their lives to the fullest. Prince Emerald knew that he had given them life beyond what he would ever have. The three prisoners left the castle and had full lives with their families. They fulfilled all the desires that Prince Topaz wanted them. And over time, they knew that all the diamonds, the emeralds, and all the different precious stones from the throne room, and so from the throne that Prince Topaz sat on, was soon whittled away because of the gifts that he gave the three men in the dungeon. See, in the Oak and Eagle Kingdom, it is such a beautiful land. And in the end, Prince Topaz realized that the gift of giving is so much more deeper and so much more meaningful. And the connection that he provided and the opportunity he provided was so much better than just him traveling the world. The ability to give and the ability to connect is such a gift, and it's such a blessing. And Prince Topaz was a very happy prince to the end of his days. The end. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I wanted to share this story because I think it really spoke more about the second prisoner. I had watched a Netflix show called When They See Us, and it was about some boys that were wrongly convicted of a crime. And I wanted to integrate the story of someone who had served in a dungeon for something he did not commit. And I sometimes wonder in our own lives, are there things that we end up doing or taking on, or perhaps either being asked to take on that we don't necessarily have to take on, but we choose to do it because of relationships and connections and sacrifice and unconditional love? When was the last time you sacrificed something? Well, with all those deep thoughts, I hope that you enjoyed this empathy tale. And I hope that the Forgiven Prisoners, which this is the episode called The Forgiven Prisoners, I hope that you will take some time to think about it. Well, feel free to connect with me on mykidslocker.com. If you have any story ideas, if you want to just connect with me about some feedback on stories, love to hear from you. So hopefully I will see you around digitally, or maybe I'll see you in the next empathy tale. But until then, remember to create compassion one story at a time. It's important to everyone. Let's make the world a better place. Thank you so much for listening.
3, 2, 1.